Hey everybody, welcome back to another family campfire. Um, Tonight we have the honor of having Brandon, SwanzeySearcher, with us, and he's been on here quite a bit as the moderator. Everybody, of course, knows him. Everybody knows of him. Uh, Finally, we get to ask him some questions and find out more about him. He came onto the panel as a panelist instead of as a guest originally, so it's about time that we finally get to ask him some questions. And I'm going to go ahead and get them all started. So, Josh, if you want to take over and get questions going, I'll hand it over to you.
Wow. Okay. I'm still trying to get around here. Let's see. You've been in the hobby how long now, Swansea?
It'll be 4 years next month.
Oh, next month. So we're even kind of coming up on a bit of an anniversary for you then.
Yeah, my father-in-law had heard me talking about metal detecting and watching the digger shows and stuff like that for quite a while, and finally for my birthday, which is in October, he bought me a gift certificate to a local dealer here and said, you know, I'm sick of listening to you talk about it and watching you do research on your own area and stuff, and he says, you know what, it's about time to finally get into it.
Nice. And you actually started out with a 250, right?
I did. I actually took the gift certificate. It was for $400. I bought it the 250. I also made sure I bought a pinpointer because I saw a lot of frustrating videos on YouTube that I said I'm not going to take handfuls of dirt and swing it over the coil and spend 12 times as long to find a target.
Right. Well, that's certainly understandable. The pinpointers do speed up target recovery out in the field, which, you know, obviously you well know too, being into it for 4 years now.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine these people that did it otherwise. You know, I know when you guys, I'm sure when you started, you know, to grab handfuls of dirt and swing it over the coil, set it down, grab a handful, that to me just would drive me absolutely nuts.
Yeah, those pinpointers are handy, definitely. And what pinpointer did you start out with? Are you still using your original one, or have you found that through the time in the hobby that you have been in, you've kind of hit your niche, so to speak, as far as your personal preference?
I did start with the Garrett Pro Pointer. I didn't have any problems with it for a little while. Maybe early spring of the following year after detecting, it started doing the falsing like everybody runs into, and you know, hold it up in the air and it starts beeping and going off. But of course, I was doing what I saw in videos and what it said to do with the pinpointer. It says it was capable of scraping the dirt in the hole, and I was using it as a shovel basically. So I do have that as my backup after Garrett rebuilt it and sent it back to me. But now I currently use the orange Garrett Carrot.
Nice. Those are very good pinpointers, those carrots.
It is. I mean, because I like to detect in the rain. I don't mind being out there while it's snowing as long as the ground's not frozen solid. I don't have to worry about getting water into the speaker or any of that garbage.
Right, and with Garrett rebuilding the other one for you or replacing it,
Yep.
You've got a good backup that way. As long as you don't use it as a shovel.
Yeah, I stopped that. I started using like hand shovels now instead of using it as a full-on backhoe.
That was a bit of a miscommunication, I guess you could say, for a lot of people, where since that scraping blade was there, a lot of people had kind of fell into that trap, I do believe. How long did you run your 250 before you, because you ran that 250 and then you upgraded to a AT Pro, right?
Yeah, I only used the Ace 250 from October to the end of January.
And so in a matter of like 3 months, you already knew that you were enjoying the hobby, you were going to get yourself a little higher end machine and was going to stick with it.
Exactly. I after watching, you know, I mean, I did okay with my Ace 250. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, I found my first non-clad coin was a 1788 mass copper, which is the picture shown when I speak, and the picture's there in really great shape. And then I found some Roosevelts and some Mercury dimes and stuff like that. And then come January, I said, you know what? it's time to treat myself to a machine that's going to be more fit for what I want to do with it. And I went and bought the AT Pro and held on to it for 3 months before I had a chance to even use it.
Yeah, I believe I can recall you saying that you had it out in the garage or something, playing with it during the winter months, just kind of air testing, maybe becoming accustomed with the signals, the VDI, and all of that.
The garage, the dining room table, the living room table, the couch, didn't matter where it was. You know, the funny thing is I never even put the shaft together until April, but I had the controls and the coil. Just walking around the house checking different signals. I mean, I was literally walking up to brass doorknobs and hinges and my wife's plate in her back and the rings on her fingers, and she's like, "Are you just going to cut this out?"
Well, then, it sounds like you were certainly getting plenty of experience in with the detector before you even got to the field with it then.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what things sounded like, and of course, you can't dig a hole in New Hampshire to put in a test garden or anything like that in that time of year. So I'd come out in the garage and I'd get it on an all wooden table, and I'd put actually what I was using was 2x4 blocks of wood and putting a quarter down underneath them or a dime or a nickel and air testing it through wood, which was funny. Is that I mean I don't know what the correlation between wood and dirt would be, how equivalent they are, but it was absolutely ridiculous.
Wow. Did you notice, out of curiosity, if you were doing that where you kind of had these targets placed under blocks of wood, did the signal skew any or change from what you would normally see it has in the ground?
You know what's funny is when April rang around, we had maybe 2 inches of ground frost still when I was able to get out with the machine. 90% of the things that I depth tested at with the blocks of wood or anything were almost identical to the depth and the signals and the sounds that I was hearing in the hard packed ground.
Nice.
So if you don't have the option to dig a hole, I highly recommend putting a bunch of 2x4s on top of each other with a coin underneath them, and you're gonna pretty much simulate what the packed ground would sound like anyway.
Right. So it wasn't like you had put this time in trying to familiarize yourself with the machine, only to turn around and have to make adjustments to what you had become accustomed to because of the air testing.
No, I'd say I pretty much had a lot of it down. I mean, of course, I'm still learning. I mean, even after having this machine for 3 years, I'm still learning all the time what certain sounds sound like. And again, we have highly mineralized soil up here anyway, so you get a lot of halo effect. You get a lot of hot rocks in the ground. We get into a lot of fields that have the old coal dumps. There might have been a fire at some point, so you pull up pieces of coal. That stuff is really going to throw you off out in the fields. But as far as what the coin signal sounded like and what they sounded like at different depths and how the signal changes a little bit or the sound changes, it really made a big difference. So I didn't go out there blindly, but it also helps coming from another Garrett product. I think it made the transition really easy.
Oh yeah, I would agree. For a lot of people, because there are a lot of AT Pro users out there that did kind of switch to the AT Pro from the Ace line, and it seems like it was a very comfortable transition for them to do.
Yeah, the third time I ever had the machine out and actually used it was at one of the Best of Northeast there, the big hunt that we have up here in New Hampshire every year. That was my third time using the machine, and the first day we were it's an old schoolyard, but the first day I found a 1 real near a soccer post at about 6 inches down. Didn't even know what the coin was, but it came up as a penny signal, more so an Indian head signal, but it came up well. I dug that. The second day I dug down 6 inches and found a 1972 gold class ring.
Right. Very nice. That was a nice find. Took you a little bit of time to return it, but
it took you a little bit of time to figure out how to return it.
I just helped do what I could. You're the one that did the return, so. But definitely very cool to be able to be a part of that process, especially after hearing how the paper didn't seem to do much luck for you, because you had you had spoke to people in the area, you had contacted your local paper, you had contacted the high school, all basically with dead ends.
Yeah, with all for naught. Nothing came up, and it's funny is after I'd exhausted every possible research I could possibly do, that's when I actually joined Facebook. Was shortly after I'd exhausted everything I could figure out what to do, and it was shortly after that I found you on Facebook, and you had more knowledge of how to do this stuff. That was the up till about a month ago. That's the only piece of gold I've ever found.
Right, and I believe a month or so ago, that was also another gold ring, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a ring that was made out of Buffalo, New York. There was no carat markings on the inside, so I thought maybe it just plated or something. And actually, one of the guys from the Stealth Diggers, Gordon, who makes all the weird little pictures and stuff on there, he recognized the WWW that was marked on the inside, and it was a manufacturing company out of Buffalo, New York. And he found the actual advertisement from back then for like $3.50, and it's a 14 karat gold with 5 citrine stones in it, made in 1914.
Wow, that's wild.
And that was in the middle of a hayfield.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. It came out of the ground in remarkably nice shape.
Yeah, it's got a little discoloration probably from the amount of iron that we have in the ground up here, which is why I thought maybe it wasn't real gold at the time. But after looking at the advertisements there, I mean, the thing's not even bent, which was kind of neat. But again, that was another learning curve on the AT Pro, because that's a smaller women's ring. The ring that I found before rang up as like a 62, 64, because it was a big honking 10 karat gold ring. This thing rang up as in the foil range as a 42 till it was out of the ground, then it rang up as a 47. But that was one of those things that 6, 7 inches in the ground, it's probably not a piece of foil off the top of a milk bottle or something like that. That's when you take your chances in a farm field that's been used since the 1750s.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, was with your ring from 1972. That was a larger, chunkier ring, so it probably rang up more like a coin would, where this one would have rang up lower.
Oh yeah, much lower. I mean, it literally, not many people that use the AT Pro will dig a low 40s target, because 99.9% of the time it's garbage. But at that depth, it's one more hole. I'm going to dig several hundred that day anyway. What's one extra hole, and pull it out of the ground?
Right. And you can dig a lot of foil and a lot of pull tabs, but when you dig that one nice target that shows up in that same range, it makes all those other holes worthwhile.
It sure does. It put a smile on my face.
I'm sure it did. That was a very nice find, sir. Definitely. And speaking of your finds, you have, you mentioned your 1788 copper, the Real, but really you have found a few Reals as well as a number of coppers.
Oh yeah.
So
that's the joy of living up here.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Being that you are in an area that is steeped so much in history, you're quite fortunate for the area that you live in. Therefore, you're going to make those nicer, more historically significant finds, in a sense, as far as the coinage, the buttons. I believe you, what, it was a War of 1812 button, possibly?
Yeah, last year I dug a War of 1812 Massachusetts artillery flat button that still has a lot of the gold gild on it, that actually made American Digger magazine. That was a beautiful one in the same field, maybe 20 yards away. I dug 2 General Service War of 1812 buttons, the eagle on the cannon, all in the same area. And this is what we were talking about earlier, Tar Heel and I, was it's amazing how on Facebook you see a lot of people talking about the Civil War artifacts that people find, and that's the desirable target. People are always looking for the Civil War buttons, the bullets. Up here we don't have a lot of that, but we have the opportunity to dig War of 1812 as far back as Revolutionary War stuff as well.
Right. Yeah, it may be a little bit of a different type of find based on your area, but it's still an interesting history. And like for myself, I don't necessarily go after anything specific. I just like to find the old stuff.
Me too, and that's what I was going to bring up as well. Is you know, a lot of people go out, and I don't have any problem with it. They go to do the beach hunting. They go in the surf to find the lost gold and the lost silver rings and stuff like that, which is fine. They do a lot of parks and a lot of schools, which I do the parks and the schools. If I've got 2 hours to kill and school's not in session or something like that, I have no problem doing that either. I'm more interested in the historical aspect of what I can find with a metal detector. And to be honest with you, when I started this hobby, this is why I started with the Ace 250. I had no idea that there was even that amount of older history in my own area. You know, when I chose the name SwanzeySearcher for my forums before I even got onto Facebook and everything, I only searched in the town of Swansea in small parks, personal permission, stuff like that, and really figured I'm going to be lucky if I can hit the 1950s silver coins and be good with that. You know what I mean?
Right, and then you hit a 1788 coin, so that kind of had to have been a little bit of a surprise for you at first, I'm sure.
Well, that right there told me, I said, you know, my social life beyond my wife and my family and my other hobbies like hiking, they're gone.
So you're going, uh-oh, that's it. I'm hooked.
You know,
There's no getting away.
You know, I found that 1788 mass copper. Like I said, it was my first non-clad coin. I never dug a wheat cent, an Indian head, a Roosevelt dime that was silver, anything like that. I hadn't even found any of that stuff. So to get in the 1700s clubs before I dug into the 1800s clubs or even a wheat cent, I said, you know, there's something wrong here.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of look and go, wait a minute, you know, where do I go from here? How do I top this?
Well, the worst part is I accused Gordon and Jim, the two guys that I detect with most of the time, of planting it there because they said, well, we're going to be in this row and I'm going to be in this row. Why don't you come down the middle and follow between us? I said, okay, and this is literally 20, 30 yards out of the car in this potato farm. This thing comes out of the ground, and of course I'm a newbie. I didn't know what the hell the coin was. So Jim, I flipped it over and I see 1788, and I called Jim over because Jim's been detective for 20 plus years, and I said, is this 1788 or 1988? He goes, no, it's 1788. And I said, well, okay, well, what is it? And so he told me what the coin was, and then, you know, I'm sitting there for a minute just baffled. Either I thought it was fake or they planted it. You know, I said it to him several times. I said, what in the hell's going on with this coin, you guys?
Did you maybe find yourself in a situation, because that's a pretty old coin, you know, there's people that have hunted for years and years and years and not touched anything that old. Did you find yourself, after you came to the conclusion that, okay, they had not planted it, was Jim or Gordon just kind of looking at you like, oh, you so suck?
Well, the funny thing was, this was the first time they invited me to go out detecting with them.
Oh.
Yeah, every other time I never detected with Jim before. I had with Gordon at local parks up here and stuff. You know, we went to what we've got called Wheelock Park, which used to be a muster field back in the 1800s. And he found a 2-cent piece out of there, and I never found anything. I found a couple musket balls and stuff like that, again, with the Ace 250. Then they said, well, we've got this permission down in Northfield. If you want to come down and, you know, play around with your new machine, they told me what kind of shovel to bring. You know, you don't want to bring your hand lesh tool or anything like that because it's going to be useless in this plowed field. So I went out to Agway, which is a local farming store here, and got a regular spade shovel and went down there, found that coin, and I mean, I sat in my car with this coin in my hand for probably 15 minutes afterwards, just trying to figure out, did I just dig this thing out of the ground?
Right, or maybe even going, you know, look at how old this is. How did this thing wind up here? What was, like with me, what was this person doing when they lost this coin?
Well, I do that now, and to be honest with you, Josh, at the time I didn't, because I still didn't realize what it was, you know, entirely. I didn't realize that it was a state copper made by Massachusetts for 2 years. You know, it was before the United States was actually fully minting coins. You know, I found all this out later. So at the time, to me, I just didn't know what to do with it to not ruin it. So it's funny, as I cleared off my back seat of my car and I set it on the back seat of the car with nothing around it so nothing could touch it. Again, I was baffled.
Right.
But
so
now,
I mean, you're going, well, it's a neat old coin, I guess, but you didn't really, I guess the significance of the age and the historic value hadn't really set in right then.
Not a bit. I put 2 and 2 together and ended up with something around 7.
I like the analogy.
Oh, it was
Definitely.
terrible. I had no idea.
Now, being up there where you are in in your area, have you found that you're really kind of knocking finds off of your bucket list quick, or do you not even really have much of a bucket list where it's like, I don't really care. I'm just out to see what I can find.
I started with a bucket list and then got really frustrated when I wasn't finding the things that I wanted to find. And then it humbled me to say, you know what, you're still finding dandy buttons, you're finding tomback buttons, you're still dating into the 1700s. The amount of King George coppers I found by this point has desensitized me to that part of it. To me, more so now, I'm more interested in I do like finding military buttons. I found that amazing silver inlaid buckle the other day. To me, like you asked me before, does it make you sit and think about wondering how it was lost or why it was there or what it might have meant to somebody to be lost? That changed a complete 360 with me, and that's how I look at it every time now.
That is another thing I would like to bring up. That buckle looks like it cleaned up very, very well. A very nice find. What did you do with that when you found it, as far as how did you clean it, preserve it, and what's happened to it since then? Did you put it in a little shadow box or anything like that?
It is going to go into a shadow box. I haven't actually made one up yet, but as far as cleaning it goes, I had put it out into a couple of groups on Facebook, and I can't remember his name, and I apologize for that. Somebody had said that the best thing to do is take a soft bristled brass brush to it, because it's not silver plated, it's silver inlaid. You won't take the silver off if you do it lightly. He said there's no cracks, there's no chips out of it. Soft bristle brush with a microfiber cloth or a jeweler's cloth, and keep doing that, and you'll get all the detail to come back up, because I didn't realize that an inlay was a actual piece of silver placed over the top of the brass and adhered to it, as opposed to plating that I know of where they dip it, one or two or three times, whatever. That thing just sparkles. All the hand etching came out on it, and the guy estimated it to be 1770s through the 1790s.
Nice. Very, very nice. And it did. It turned out quite well. And you've certainly done well for yourself with the time that you have had in the hobby. I know you use one of, I believe it's one of the tent field display boards for some of your better finds, which I'm sure looks very nice on the wall.
Oh, it does. I mean, that's where the War of 1812 buttons are. All my reals are in there. It's funny, you can fit 2 dimes pretty nicely in each one of them. So I put my first Roosevelt dime next to my first Mercury in one of the capsules. I put my first Barber and my first Seated in the capsule next to it. So I got all 4 dimes right next to each other. I've got, that mass coppers in there, some of my nicer large cents, like an 1838 and an 1836 that I've gotten. My first silver ring, because when I found that, and I'll tell you what, I about pooped myself when I found that thing with the Ace 250. Just a know-nothing silver ring, but to me, that was like the first bucket list thing I was able to cross off my list once I realized I had a list.
Right, exactly. I mean, at that point, it's your first, so it's a little exciting. It's your first piece like that, never found one before, so there's a little bit of an excitement and even sense of accomplishment when they do come along like that. We always remember our firsts.
Well, it took me 3 years to find my first Indian head penny.
Right.
That's pretty pathetic when you're talking finding reals, King George coppers, large cents. And I finally found my first Indian head penny last year. So when I took it out and I got it cleaned up, that is in the dead center at the top inside of that display box, because I don't know why. That to me was a milestone. I was like, if I can't find an Indian head penny, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, I could see where that could seem to be a little frustrating at first, where you're saying, man, I've got this mass copper, I've got this button from the War of 1812, I've got seated dimes, reals. Why can't I find an Indian?
I thought it was me. I dig every penny signal everywhere I go, and for me to take 3 years to find an Indian head penny when Kurt France pulls one out every 30 seconds when he's detecting, I was like, you're kidding me.
Yeah, they just jump out of the ground in front of him.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I really thought there was something wrong with me or my detector to say this little freaking copper penny is eluding me for this long.
Well, and that's the way it goes sometimes. Some of those finds that we strive to make do show up when we least expect them to.
And that's why I stopped worrying about a bucket list. When it comes, it comes. You know, it happened a couple weeks ago there. I finally found my first trime in the same hole as a large scent. You know, I got the large scent signal right off the bat, pulled it out. Yep, it's beat the crap. And then went over the hole again, and I got a consistent 62 signal. Now, 62 on the AT Pro typically will be a button, a piece of can slaw, and usually nothing good. And that little tiny coin pops out of the hole. So I took a picture of it while it was in the plug, while I was in the field, because I thought I had another half real. It's about the same size, I guess. So I said to Carl and Jay that were with me, a couple of new buddies that attacked with me, and I said, oh, another half real. So I took a picture of it in the plug, and I said, Carl, pull it out. He pulls it out, and he says, it's not even a half real. And I said, oh, great, it's the end of a soda tab or something, you know?
Right.
So he drops it in my hand, and I could see the 3 Roman numerals, and I'm like, oh, finally.
Well, that's also another very, very nice find for you, and I'm sure they look great in the tent field display that you have. I've got one of those myself, and they're very nicely made. Really great for the buttons and stuff like that. So very commendable, the finds that you have made. And speaking of the buttons, recently Tar Heel even hit a very nice button. So I think I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to him. And also recently it had a birthday, so happy birthday to him as well. Over to you, Tar Heel.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that, man.
That is a beautiful button there you got, Matt.
We're well past the birthday celebration at this point, but
hey,
welcome.
You only turned 25 once, Matt.
No, twice in this case.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, Brandon. It's great to be able to chat with you like this. You know, you're an active contributor, and you take part in a lot of the forums and shows and things like that go on. And I'm just curious, what is it that drives you to participate so heavily in the shows and call in on the shows and things like that? I mean, I know that the shows absolutely love it, but what is it that drives you to participate so much?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first started with this, and I started, like I said, with my local forums. We have a couple of them up here in New Hampshire, and you know, we had some pretty decent activity in those things, and they started to die down. And I avoided Facebook like the plague, like I know a lot of people do, because I'm not interested in people's drama. I'm not interested in where you're going to have lunch. I really don't care that, you know, your child pooped for the first time today. You know, stuff like that just doesn't interest me. When I got into the Facebook community and it was welcomed so open-armedly by a bunch of strangers, and then discovered the radio shows after that where they do the same thing, and they're interviewing people that are from all different walks of life, all different parts of the country, using different machines. The camaraderie in this hobby is nothing like I've ever been on before. I mean, I've been on sports teams, I've played softball, you know, in high school I was a track and football player. You have that limited bit of camaraderie, but this has been tenfold more than I could have ever imagined. And that's why I try to stay as active as I can, because a lot of these people have helped me, identify some of the things I found. It interests me, you know, in your videos as well, what you're finding in your area. And, you know, I get envious of what people like you find. I get envious of what people like Josh find, where people Bill out in Ohio find. To me, I love seeing that. And the first time that I ever feel jealous of it, though, then I'm done. You know, that's the big part of it, too.
You know, you bring up a great point. The camaraderie in this community is amazing. And, you know, every now and then you end up with a bad apple here and there, but by and large, for the most part, it's an amazing group, and they really will help you out from start to finish. Whether you're a beginner or an advanced metal detectorist, the community always seems to be there for you.
It sure is. And, you know, and like what Josh did for that ring return, you know, I didn't know him from Adam. I never met the guy in my life, never talked to him on the phone. He was one that took that ring recovery that I was trying so hard for 6 months to do, because, again, I don't look for people's jewelry. That's not my thing. I'd rather have it go back to the rightful owner. You know, 42-year-old ring. If I had any opportunity to do it, I did everything that I could possibly do without using the internet other than on Google. You know, so when I finally joined Facebook and he commented on, do you mind if I try to help you find the owner of the ring, and him able to be doing that, who in their right mind is going to spend their own time to help somebody else identify or return something like that unless they wholeheartedly care about what people are doing in the hobby?
Yeah,
That to me
exactly
opened
right.
up everything to me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It means the world to the people when you're able to actually return something like that. I've had a very similar experience in reaching out to people to help me find, the home for jewelry and lost items and things like that. And it's amazing how much support there is out there.
There is, and even in, like, identifying things. I found a Prussian coin last year from the 1850s. I had no idea what the heck this coin was, and there's a significant facial marking, like this pointed thing coming off the chin, which is supposed to be a guy's beard, which, again, I'm relatively new to that type of stuff. Within seconds, somebody had the right identification, sent me a link, showed me how to figure out the year based on the types. Somebody I'd never even heard of in my life before.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you're living in the New England area, New Hampshire and whatnot. So give us a little advice for someone maybe in that area who wants to get started metal detecting. I mean, what would you recommend for someone getting started in metal detecting in that area?
Well, what I started doing was, in my own local city I call it a city, it's a 20,000 people city, that's the biggest city around here. I found out back then, because I was playing around in the parks, playing around in the schools, when they're not in session, and found out that by just going online and typing in the name of the park, it was a muster field back in the 1800s. So the first thing you should do, what I recommend doing, is saying, even if it's a local park in your own area, figure out how long that park's been there. Was there any home sites around it that are no longer there? My grandfather had told me as a kid that people through New England especially always encamped along the rivers. So, where there's water, there was activity. So where I live, where the Connecticut and the Ashwillet River meets, there must have been a lot of activity in that area. So I asked for permissions near the farm fields that were closest to the rivers, the places that are being hayed, that have been hayed for 30, 40 years. Little did I know they've been hayed for 230 years. I did a lot of going to the town libraries, talking to the librarian herself, because she could tell me right off the bat that this field was used in X amount of time. Another thing that really intrigued me in this hobby was I remember going out hunting with my grandparents as a kid, and to me, I never gave a cellar hole a second thought. And I still don't, because I don't like cellar hole digging. I prefer the openness and not bouncing my coil off a tree, but if you're in this area and you're interested in the history, as that buckle proved a couple weeks ago, well, last week, that has its own true history. Just finding lock plates out of the ground and old hinges and stuff like that, it's all historical up here. You can go out in an open field next to a high school, like my own high school, Monadnock, is down the road. It was built in 1964, and I've pulled 2 large cents out of that high school because this land is so old in New England. That's what people don't realize, that back in the early 1800s, all of this property up in New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts was only 20% forest and 80% cleared. It's the opposite now. Now it's 80% forest and 20% cleared. All this land was used for something. You may go out in the middle of the woods and you say, there's no reason why people would be here. But you know what? 150, 170 years ago, this was all field. So
You're
you look at
exactly
the ages
right.
of
You're exactly right.
ages of the trees. You see a tree that's 6-inch diameter. Okay, that tree's not that old. But then you see a tree that's got say a 28-inch diameter. Okay, that's an old tree, but there's a bunch of small trees in between. Somebody had cleared that out in the not so far past, but it was used for something.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, which is why I do a lot of hunting in the woods, because back in the day it was a cleared field and it was highly used.
Right.
I want to ask you a little bit. I mean, you found some amazing coins and some amazing relics, as obviously that silver applied buckle is incredible, but what do you consider yourself to be? Are you a coin shooter or a relic hunter?
I prefer the relics all day long. They're much more personal. Somebody that lost that buckle, for example, like you just brought up, they had to have been somebody that had a little bit of money at least. Let's put it that way. You weren't going to pay that kind of money to have a silver inlaid buckle when you could have had a regular brass buckle if you could help it. I love finding pocket watches. My biggest thing that I like finding the most are the buttons. The mass artillery button was amazing. The regular 1812 buttons that I find are amazing. I found Massachusetts volunteer militia buttons from the Civil War. I love those because those are personal. Anybody could have been carrying the coins for X amount of time, but that button was worn by somebody for a purpose.
Does it ever amaze you at the locations where you find the strangest things sometimes? I mean, whether it's a coin or a relic. I mean, sometimes you find them in the most places that you would least expect.
I'll tell you, my first Mercury dime and my first Barber dime came on the same day within 20 minutes of each other in my own yard that was built in 1990. So explain that math to me. You know, that's right there is what told me that things are much older than they seem in this area. My house, like I said, we're in a development that only has 14 houses. They were all developed from 87 to 92. Before that, there was absolutely nothing here, even on historic aerial maps that go back to the early 1900s that show any activity in where I live. Well, that goes back to my point that it had to have been pasture land at the time because a lot of the trees up here are 8-10-inch diameter and small. So the land was used by somebody. You know, the horseshoes that come out of my own yard, the oxen shoes come out of my own yard, which Henry would have a field day because I think there's about 30 of them that come out of my own property. But, you know, that type of stuff tells you right there that even for people that are new that I've talked to around in my area, they say, well, there's no place to go because everybody's already been there. Anywhere you go is old in New England. It's been around since the 1600s for the most part.
Yeah. And,
my best advice is pick a spot and hit the ground running.
Exactly. It goes to show that it's great to have the old maps and do your research and things like that, but the best research you can do is get your coil to the soil and get out there and hunt.
You're damn right.
Yep. Hey, I want to ask you one question, and I noticed a post on Facebook that you made a while back, and it was about a pendant that you had found, and it was kind of a sentimental find. And I hope you don't mind me asking about it, but I'd like you to kind of elaborate on that that little heart-shaped pendant that you found about a month ago.
That's a great story, Matt, and I'm glad you actually asked that. That was probably one of my best finds I've ever found in my life.
Yeah.
My mother passed away last year, and we went to an actual school up in Westmoreland, New Hampshire, and we were hunting around this place. The place dates back to the 1880s, I believe, is what the land was used for. That's on public record. And we were going around. We weren't finding much, and I pulled a 1956 penny out of the ground. And the funny thing is, that's the year my mom was born.
Right.
And so I said to Gordon, Gordon, look, it's a penny from the year my mother was found. So I, did my thing. I pointed to the sky and said, hey, Mom, the year you were born. I might have moved 6 inches, and I get a same signal. It's like a penny signal. Dig down maybe 4 inches, and I pulled out of the ground a heart-shaped locket. And on the heart-shaped locket, it says, I love you. And that was one of the most emotional metal detecting days of my life, to pull that out right there, and all I could do was sit there with that thing in the palm of my hand and say, if you don't believe in the afterlife, that's your own thing. If you're not spiritual, if you don't go to church, doesn't matter. But right there, that said to me, my mom was watching over me that day.
What an amazing moment. That's awesome, man.
And to follow up on that, Matt, too, another thing that I've always done, when I started metal detecting, my mother was my biggest supporter in this hobby. Every time, my mother was a born-again Christian, so every time I found a religious medallion, whether it was an aluminum one or silver one or gold-plated one, didn't matter what it was, every time I found it, I sent my mom a picture, and I'd give it to her the next time I saw her. So she'd keep them in her purse. So when my mom passed away, I found in her purse a little leather pouch that had all these religious medallions that I'd always given her over the last few years. And inside my vest, there's a pocket that has a little lanyard attached to it. That's where that little leather pouch is attached to. Every time I go metal detecting, they're always with me, and if I find more, they always go in there. Like this past year, I found a lead Jesus on a cross, and that's in that same pouch, and I keep adding to it every time.
I love that story, and that's what this hobby is all about, Brandon. You just hit the nail on the head. It's so much more than just the monetary value of what you find. There's the sentimental finds, and there's some personal finds that mean a lot to you. So I appreciate you sharing that with us tonight.
It's probably, like I said, if you had to ask me what my best find ever was, it may not be that, but it's definitely the most sentimental find and probably the best day digging, regardless of what I found otherwise since I started.
Yeah, exactly. Utah, I think that's about all I've got to cover. I think Josh did an excellent job up front, and I think that's all of my questions, so I'm going to turn it over to you, brother.
Okay. Yeah, you've both done great, covered almost everything. I was sitting here going through my checklist a couple of times, and all of that's checked off. But I do want to give a quick shout out to people in the external. Thanks everybody for coming out. I noticed we have Jeff Miller out there, Ohio Relic Hunter, whoever Ohio Metal Detecting is.
That's Bill
Yeah.
Marshall, my buddy in Ohio.
I keep seeing that Ohio metal detecting around, and I don't know. Maybe I'll have to get a hold of NH Treasure Hunter and see, who that guy is that's bugging him so much.
Super Neo made it out there. Dish Bronson, always great to see you show up. Dish Outdoors. Stump Greenwood was out there for a little bit. Thanks everybody for coming out and joining us. It's always great to have you guys in the external. If you have any questions, type them in. We'll get them asked. It's always great to have all the great people backing me up with this. With that said, Swansea, I got a couple questions. I know we've touched on this a few times on the hunt coming up in Ohio that you're going to be part of. Do you have anything other than that planned in the near future that you're looking forward to doing?
Not necessarily. I do have an invite from, I don't know if you guys know who they are, Ina Finn and Kelly Ray down in, I think they're in Virginia. They've invited me down if I want to go out there and do a hunt with them as well. I do have a local group called History Hunters of New Hampshire, which are literally local guys to me. We do monthly group digs on new permissions that we've gotten for different parts of Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Those are kind of localized. I'd like to set my sights on at some point getting down to maybe digging in Virginia. That's a kind of a bucket list thing for me. I know it's a waiting list thing, and it's like a who's who type place. You can't get in there unless you've been on such and such a group or such and such a forum for X amount of time and stuff. That would be a great thing to do. Other than that, I don't know of a lot of big digs that happen around the country, to be honest with you. I've never done a big dig type thing. I mean, we do the New Hampshire thing up here every year that's sponsored by a local dealer. It's called the Best of Northeast. That's every April. I've been to it the last couple of years. I just don't know of any place other than, Detect America does their detecting pizza thing. It's not something I would go to because it's like a one-day thing and like a 4-hour drive and a plane flight or whatever. I mean, it's just, unless it's going to be a longer term thing, I can't get the time off of work to do something so small, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, you're mentioning hunting with these different people, and I know you've hunted with a lot of other metal detectors in the past. Which do you prefer, hunting by yourself or going out with other metal detectors and hunting for relics?
I'll tell you, I go hunting by myself maybe 1 out of every 20 times I detect. I prefer going with other people. We've got a bunch of new guys in our local group, and we're actually creating our own little club. I've got a bunch of these guys that have only been detecting a year or less, and they call me the guru in the hunt because apparently they think I'm so freaking smart at this crap, which I'm not. I just pay attention to what I see, you know what I mean? So I prefer that. I like to see what other people find. I'd like to get these guys onto a hunt site that has really pissed me off, for lack of better terms, and see somebody pull something good out of there. I prefer seeing that. I like to see these new guys finding their first something, their first Indian head, their first large scent. That guy Wayne there, it's the first time he's ever been out with other people, and he finds a freaking half dime right out in the middle of where I've already detected. And I consider myself very thorough, and I told Wayne, I said, the next time you go detecting with us, you're not allowed to use anything but a magnet on a string.
Oh, that's great.
Send him out with Keebler.
Oh, exactly. You guys can hunt all the big iron all you want. You pull up the car hoods and the half a tractor, that's perfectly fine, but leave the coins and the relics for me.
Oh, great.
I didn't invite him to show me up.
Well, what would you, I know Tar Heel touched on this, on what you would suggest on new detectors to do and how to approach their first hunt in starting out. Would you also apply the same knowledge or the same basic track of that same thought to younger detectors that are new starting out?
I think if you had a younger detectorist, they're going to be a lot more open to getting yeses at permissions. I think a lot of people see older people that detect, I mean, even my age or somebody way as old as Matt or yourself, they're going to look at it more so as you're trying to find the good stuff that's monetarily valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had to throw that in there. But what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, and the same thing goes for any kid that wants to go out detecting. Find somebody who knows what they're doing in the hobby, and if not, if your parents aren't interested, have them take you to a kid's house or something, and just say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn something new. I'm interested in my own town's history or my own state's history and stuff like that. No good-hearted person is going to say, I don't want you looking around my yard. People where I live are very, very friendly. We live in a very friendly community. We don't have city life. We don't have crime. We don't have violence. We don't have any of that stuff going on. People here, as long as you talk about what you're doing and show them what you're finding, which is what I do too, is I always bring finds to a permissions house. I say, look, this is what I found at the Johnson farm. Here's a couple of coins. Here's some buttons. I'm not finding anything worth of value. If I do find something worth of value, the first thing I say to them is, this might be $100 coin. If you want it, it's yours. I already got the pictures.
Yeah. What Wow. Can't believe you called me old, man. Now, I know you also hunt with the AT Pro. Is that right?
That's correct. I have
Do
two of
you?
them actually. I just was talking to Matt about it. I actually have two AT Pros. One that I got from the local dealer, and another one that I got from a buddy out in Illinois, Craig Stryker. I think he's actually in the chat room right now.
Do
Yes,
you
he
ever?
is.
Yes, he is. By the way. Do you ever see yourself changing to a different machine in the future, or do you pretty much stuck with the AT Pro and?
I'm not stuck with it. Let me put it that way. I'm not stuck with that machine. That's a good machine. If I find that I can't find anything else with it, which probably will never happen, my next thought would possibly be going to something like the XP Deus as far as price range goes, because I know it's a great machine. I know Jim that uses it a lot. I've played around with his machine a few times. I've considered maybe the MindLab E-Track or something like that. The only problem with that is I'm not one that likes the learning curve aspect of things. I like to stick with what I know, and that's a totally different ball game with machines.
Um, Here's kind of a off the wall question for you. What if you could add anything to the AT Pro in order to help you out more and see one more item or one more bell or whistle on the AT Pro than what it has, what would that be?
I have a couple of them. One would be when I go out and detect with friends and stuff like that, we don't use headphones. It would be nice to have a volume control on the AT Pro. It's obnoxiously loud. The other thing I'd like to do is, because we do a lot of evening and dusk hunts, because in the summertime, believe it or not, being that I'm from New Hampshire, it's not always 75 below zero. It does get hot up here. So we do some evening hunting. A backlight would be excellent on the AT Pro.
Okay.
Also, and not being so damn coil heavy. That is a very coil heavy machine.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've also heard there's other things that some of the machines, the newer machines that other companies have out that I kind of like is like the GPS pinpointing, and where you can type in GPS coordinates and it'll walk you straight to where that location is. Kind of like that idea myself, but
The only thing with the GPS for me, Utah, was I would never use it because I go over the same spots over and over again, and I don't mind overlapping because I'll come in at it north and south, I'll come in at it east and west, and I'll come at it northeast to southwest. You're going to get a different signal every time you come in a different direction. It's like the 360 thing when you're digging a hole. I don't ever dig a hole that I go in one direction. I go 90 degrees, check the signal again. I go another 90 degrees, check it again. So I'm really consistent on my pinpointing as well as I know what my target identification is at that point too. I've gone to the same places with the same machine over again and found things that I know I've missed before. The GPS to me would only deter me from overlapping my previous patterns.
yeah. Well, the reason I like the GPS thing is because you can look up coordinates on Google Earth and find out where the houses and yards used to be and as to where they
Okay, I
are
see what you're
now,
saying.
and you can actually enter that GPS, and once you get out there close to that field, it'll walk you into where that old house used to be.
Right. So you're talking using it as a GPS, not tracking where you've detected.
Exactly. Not tracking where you've already been. That's that's not what I was trying to get at.
Bill
But
just
that's
made a good point too. He just said the same thing that I've heard other people mention. I've never thought about it, but Bill was saying a threshold on the AT Pro.
I never thought about that either.
Me either.
Huh, that is a good idea. Um, yeah, I'm sorry I'm not asking you much about what you found because they pretty much covered your finds and your approach to the hobby, which I might add is great. It's always great to see other detectors out there that have such a good approach to the hobby as you do, and I thank you for that.
Oh,
Um,
I appreciate that.
but
I'll tell you though, my start to this hobby started 2 years before I started picking up a metal detector. It was watching the videos. I watched Tar Heels videos before I even started detecting. I watched a bunch of people's videos before I started detecting. That's what gave me the hunger to get into this. I had done more research on my local land and about metal detectors and just the approaches to the hobby. I don't know how many stupid videos I watched on digging a proper plug before I ever even dug a freaking hole.
yeah, I, I was the same way. I watched for probably 4 months, 5 months before I started digging and actually ever got a machine. So I was well addicted before I ever even held a metal detector. But
As was I, and again, that's why I said I bought the pinpointer to start with. I saw the frustration on so many people's faces when they're digging the hole, pulling the dirt, running it over the coil back and forth to figure out where the target was. And the same thing with equipment. I watched people break shovels. I watched them break hand diggers. I watched them break pinpointers. I was like, so if I'm going to start out, why start out with the cheapest of the cheap if it's not going to work?
exactly. Um, just to touch on the different buttons and stuff you were mentioning earlier. You mentioned all kinds of different um War of 1812 buttons you had dug.
Yep.
What's your favorite one of those?
Well, by far, it's got to be the War of 1812 Massachusetts artillery because it says Massachusetts across the top, artillery underneath. It's got the eagle on the cannon. It's got a beautiful green patina with the gold gilding all through the cannon and the eagle still on it.
Oh wow.
I
Yeah,
do
I'd
have a
say that.
couple of mass militia volunteer buttons from the Civil War, which that's got all written on it. It's got an arm with a sickle with a back mark of Attleboro, Massachusetts, which isn't that far from me. Those are beautiful buttons as well. But I think probably that 1812 button is the most because that's the most historically accurate to my area.
Yeah, that is amazing. By the way, being in Texas, I could only dream of finding stuff like that. So,
Well, I'll tell you, some of my favorite finds though are nothing like that. I love finding crotobells. A crotobel to me, it represents this part of the country because of course we get so much snow every year. I can only picture those horses that went through the downtown streets of New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts with all these little bells hanging on both sides of their bridle. I mean, that's what I see every time, and I like to see when people repurpose them on a leather strap and put them on the doorknob around Christmas time. You know, you open the door, and these are 1800s bells that are ringing back and forth, and you hear the dinging. It's to me, it's like it's phenomenal feeling.
yeah, that would be an awesome feeling to hear things like they used to be back in the 1800s. I've always dreamed of living back in that time period. Um, do you have anything you wanted to put out there before we call it for the evening?
I got one other thing I'll put out there. When I started with my Ace 250, I was up on what's called Mount Caesar here in Swansea. It's up above a giant cemetery that dates back to the 1700s. And with the Ace 250, of course, there's no iron audio on the Ace 250, so I got this really good signal at 8 inches deep. And I pulled up what appeared to me as to be a grave marker. And so I pulled it out of the ground. The signal was still in the ground. I pulled up another one. One of them was a GAR, was it General Army of the Republic? I believe is what that stands for, with a 5-point star. And another one that just had like a thing of wheat with a band around it. Now, I didn't know what these things were at all, so I brought them to the Town Historical Society, and they didn't know how to place them because they were obviously grave robbed. Some kid brought it up to the top of this hiking trail, threw them in the woods, and there they sat 8 inches under the ground for however many years. I gave those to the Town Historical Society. They didn't want to keep them there, so they brought them and put them into the unknown soldier's grave at that same cemetery. So they were at least back in the general area where they belonged. That right there opened up permissions in my own town by saying, you know, I don't have any interest in keeping these things. I don't know if they're worth anything. It doesn't matter. That brought up a lot of town permission, where when I went to the town office and said, hey, do you mind if I detect this field that's conservation land or whatever? They said, well, aren't you the guy that donated those 2 grave markers that are sitting across the street in the cemetery? I said, yes, I am. I said, but whatever, that's not important here. It opens up so many doors when you can put something small like that back into your local community. And this goes back again to what you asked about and Matt asked about, how to get started in the hobby. If you find something like that that doesn't mean anything to you and you can't figure out who it means something to, bring it to somebody of that public authority, and it can change the entire way you can get permissions for detecting.
Yes, it can. And the same way with if you're hunting house or private permissions, I've noticed that if you treat their property with respect and them with respect, a lot of times they talk. They talk to their friends, and next time you go over to their house to detect, they're like, look, I talked to my friend so-and-so, and they'd love to have you come out to their house.
Right, exactly.
And so respect and for the people's property and the people really does lead to a lot of open doors.
Well, and that's what I was saying with Matt too, is that, you know, you do something right by one person that you get to detect on their property, and you name drop that person. If they want to back reference you and say, yep, Brandon was allowed at my house, he did a great job, there's no holes in my yard, he showed me what he found, he offered me what he found, anything that I wanted, that person is going to be 100% more likely to say, you have free reign with my property. And it goes down and down, down. It's called the trickle-down effect, and it works amazing in this hobby if you do it the right way. I've seen it in the opposite respect, where somebody says, oh, well, I detected the Johnson's farm, and they said, well, no, I heard enough about that. No, thank you.
Exactly. I just want to thank you guys for coming on. Swansea, thank you again for allowing us to finally be able to ask you questions and interview you a little bit.
Hey, I had a good time with it.
I know in the next couple of weeks we have a couple amazing guests planned and hopefully going to be scheduled soon for that. I know we have one scheduled. We're looking at another one that hopefully he can make it soon. That would be just amazing shows. So everybody keep your eye out on who we have coming on next, because you never know. It could be an amazing guest. And Josh, Tar Heel, thank you both for coming on. Josh, that was an awesome Beyond Sight and Sound you had last night again. And if anyone out there is not going to Beyond Sight and Sound on 1,000 mics on Wednesday evenings to listen to that, you really need to, because it really is a great show. I mean, even when they have technical difficulties, they still make it amazing. So it's definitely something to watch for. Did y'all have anything you guys wanted to add before we head off?
I'm good, Utah. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm all set too. You're not going to see me posting videos anytime soon because I have a face for radio.
Face for radio. Yeah.
That's why I stay behind the mic.
That's right.
If I am just going to throw it out there that if you guys are interested in helping out with the CWPPO in any way financially, they are still gathering funds for their dig that's coming up in Ohio. Right now they are about 8,000 shy of what they need to cover that. So if you guys want to help out, you can check out Backyard Diggers on Facebook. They have auctions going on there for all kinds of really cool items. They also have the GoFundMe at gofundme.com/CWPPO. And then they also have their website now up and running. That's CWPPO.com. So if you guys want to help out or find out more about it, go check that out. We're going to be doing amazing things there coming up in October. So,
and we are trying to add sponsors as we can to the website. It takes a little bit of time, though, so we've still got people to add.
Of course. But thanks for everybody coming out in the external. and I guess we'll see you all next week.